I'm the one and only West Coast King, and welcome back to Major League 90, where we are talking Major League Soccer. And what I really want to talk about today is the transfer window business. A couple of teams have been making some big moves to help out their squads before the upcoming season, and I wanted to talk about a couple of those moves. The first one is coming from the Chicago Fire, the team that finished in last place in the league last year. They needed a lot of help all over the pitch, but specifically across that back line. They finished dead last in the league last year, not only in the table, but also in goals allowed. They allowed 58 goals. The back four was atrocious for them. They desperately needed help there. There had actually been quite a few defenders linked with a move to the Windy City, including the likes of Nemanja Vidic. Unfortunately, he did retire and did not make that move to the MLS. Not sure how much he would have helped them anyway, but they have been able to lock down now two good defenders. One, Yal Moreira from the Portuguese Premier League, and the other, Johan Kappelhof from the Eredivisie in the Netherlands. These are some pretty good defenders. You may not know them. They may not have the name recognition like Nemanja Vidic has, but they are two solid defenders that are going to help out that team, and they're not old. They're not past their prime by any means. Moreira is 28. He's a center back. He's going to anchor that defense, hopefully for years to come for them. And then Johan Kappelhof is only 24. He can play centrally or out wide, and from what I've seen of him, I think he plays better as a right back. I think they get more out of him playing out wide. He gets up the field pretty well, as well as is a pretty good defender. So those two should really help that defense that, like I said, desperately needed it. If they can bring in one or maybe even two more defenders in this transfer window, I know there's a couple more players linked to them, that would be a huge step forward for them to climb out of the basement of the MLS, which I think they're well on their way to doing this season. Now, the next bit of transfer news is still just a rumor, but it's coming closer and closer to becoming a certainty. Young Panamanian defender Roberto Chen is actually rumored with a move to the MLS. He actually has a lot of experience with the Panamanian national team, despite only being 21 years old. And it was uncertain up until now what team he was looking to sign for. And now it's being reported that he's been in Seattle for the last few days, undergoing his physical, and may sign with the Sounders in the coming days. That's a huge step, again, for the Sounders, who are looking to become younger and more athletic. He's a good defender that fits both of those bills. It's uncertain right now where he would really play. They have two great center backs in Seattle in Chad Marshall and Roman Torres, hopefully patrolling the middle this season. It's looking like, in my opinion, he might be more of a long-term solution at right back to replace Ty Mears at some point, who is 32 years old. And it looked like he lost a step last season, so we'll see what happens with him. But Roberto Chen would be another good signing for a defense in Seattle that's continuing to improve. So now we're going to move on to talk about the team that has been arguably the most active team in the league since the end of last season, and that is the LA Galaxy. They started off by selling away a couple of players that I didn't expect them to get rid of. Omar Gonzalez and Juninho, two players that have been staples in that team for the last couple of seasons, sold away south of the border to the Liga MX, and they had a couple of holes to fill in that roster. I thought they might actually be going a major roster overhaul. Instead, what they've done is they brought in a couple of players I think that fit perfectly into that team and give them exactly what they needed. The first player, Jelle van Damme, I think that's how you say his name, the Belgian center back. He's 6'4", an absolute monster in the back for them. He's going to fill in perfectly for Omar Gonzalez, who, let's face it, he's been inconsistent at best the last couple of seasons, dealt with some injuries. When he's come back, hasn't looked at his best. I think it was actually a good move for them to sell him, despite the fact he's a U.S. international, kind of one of the younger defenders on the up and up. But you know what? It was time for them to move on from him. This guy, Van Damme, I think is a very good fit for them. Despite being 32 years old, I think he's got a lot of football left in him. He's really going to solidify that back four, and I think he's going to be a very good player for them for the next couple of seasons. The next player they brought in, and this one was just finalized, Nigel de Jong from AC Milan, the central defensive midfielder. This one could be the biggest signing they've made so far in this offseason. I love him not only as a player, but how he fits into that LA Galaxy starting 11. Their midfield at times last season looked lost, chaotic. It was a mess at times, and it became a liability for them down the stretch. They started to lose games. It became worse and worse, and eventually they lost out in the first round of the playoffs. This guy is going to fix that, hopefully for them. He's a solid player in that midfield. He's going to put everyone where they need to be. He's going to be the rock in that midfield for them. He knows exactly where he needs to be, how he's going to play, and everyone else can kind of play off of him, and it's going to organize that entire midfield and hopefully turn what was a bit of a liability for them last year into a strength in this coming season. And the third international player that they brought in was the left back Ashley Cole. This one I'm really uncertain about. I tend to lean towards not liking this signing. To me, it seems more like a name signing rather than a player signing. Honestly, if you look at that roster, I don't know how Ashley Cole fits into it. I don't know if he's even better than the current fullbacks on that team. I really don't know. I have no clue how he's going to fit into that team. I know that they're planning on playing him in the left back spot and moving Robbie Rogers from the left back to the right back spot. I don't understand it. Honestly, I don't really seem to think that Ashley Cole's an upgrade for them. I really liked their fullbacks last season. I thought they were a solid group of players. If Ashley Cole improves that team, then kudos to them. I just don't see it happening. This seems to be more, like I said, a name signing, trying to get a name recognition player in, rather than trying to upgrade the roster itself. And it feeds more into that stereotype of the MLS being a retirement league for players, because clearly Ashley Cole is no longer at his best. And again, I don't know how he's going to help that team. The last bit of transfer news that I wanted to talk about is not even really news, because nothing's actually happened on this front, but it is regarding Jermaine Jones. I was asking the comments of last episode where I thought Jermaine Jones was going to end up this season. And you know what? It's kind of hard to say right now. I know he has said that he would like to go back to Germany, and that's really where he wants to play. But his contract is really held up by the fact that he has a 6-game suspension that he has to serve before he can start playing for any team. So let's talk about that little 6-game suspension that's currently hanging over Jermaine Jones' head and what it really means. I think, in my opinion, he's a good enough midfielder, a good enough player right now that teams would be willing to wait those 6 games to get a player of his caliber for the rest of the season if he was to move to Germany right now. The problem is really what that suspension represents. That suspension that's hanging over Jermaine Jones' head, to me, is more of a symbol of why the teams are unwilling to give him a contract rather than it being just the suspension itself. Jermaine Jones has always been an emotional player, and ever since he's arrived in the MLS, at least for the last couple of seasons, that emotion is starting to get the best of him, and he's been an erratic and very unpredictable player on the field. While his performances have been pretty good, it's more of the erratic performances and what he's doing on the field that it's really troubling to teams. And that 6-game suspension is a result of one of those moments where he lost his temper, his emotions got the best of him, his team just got knocked out of the playoffs, and he lost it. And he got suspended for 6 games for assaulting a ref, is technically what it's called. He grabbed the referee, and you can't do that. And that right there, I don't think teams, especially in Germany, because it would be a team that's competing, looking to either get out of the relegation zone, or a team that's looking to compete for a spot in Europe next season that would need that midfielder help that Jermaine Jones could give them. And they can't bank on a player that is erratic and unpredictable. They just can't take that chance on him. I don't know if there's a spot for him in Germany this season. So with that being said, I really don't think he'll end up back in New England this season. I think those bridges have been thoroughly burned from both ends. Jermaine Jones called their last contract offer to him a joke, and I think New England is pretty much done with his antics, not only on the field, but with the whole contract situation revolving around him. So even if they wanted him back, I don't think he would go there, and even if he wanted to go back, I don't think they would have him. So I think, in my opinion, it's most likely, with everything that's going on, he ends up somewhere in the MLS this season. I think some team is going to be willing to pony up the cash to offer him a contract that he deems suitable in order to bring in a name like Jermaine Jones, because he is still a big name in the United States, and I think that would put butts in the seats and bring in money for some team in the MLS. Maybe to start the next year in Germany, the next Bundesliga season, a fresh start in Germany, maybe he would be able to go back to Germany. But for right now, it seems most likely to me he ends up somewhere in the MLS to start this season. Where? I have no idea. So that is going to do it for the transfer news that I have to talk about today. Now, obviously, these aren't the only teams making moves in this transfer window. They're just some of the ones that I wanted to highlight because I either really did like the moves for those teams, and I thought it was a big boost for those teams, or I didn't particularly like it all that much, like the Ashley Cole deal. But let me know how you think your team is handling the transfer window this offseason, and some of the big names that your team is bringing in. And also, what do you think of some of the moves that these teams that I mentioned have made? Do you like the Ashley Cole deal for the LA Galaxy? And where do you think Jermaine Jones will end up next season? And if he stays in the MLS, where would you like to see him sign? So that's going to do it for this one. If you had as much fun as I did, make sure to let me know by leaving a like below. Subscribe if you're new. I will see you when we come back with some more Major League 90. See ya.